You've been told you need to be strong. But what if strength doesn't always mean holding it all together? What if true resilience feels more like water, flowing, flexible, and alive with God's love? In this series, you'll discover how you can move from surviving to thriving, finding a strength that heals, restores, and carries you forward.
This sermon is rated R for existential swearing at God and topics of suicide and rape. Back in 2018, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. And after having had a surgery, we were back in the oncologist's office when we learned that she was going to have to do chemo as well. After the doctor left the office, I was so angry and frustrated. I looked up to heaven and I shouted, "I fucking hate you, God." But like a lot louder. Now, what I'm really embarrassed to admit is that I wasn't swearing at God because I was angry that my wife got breast cancer. I was swearing at God because this was the year that I was on sabbatical and Sarah's cancer was messing up my plans for my sabbatical. There you go. There's your not so holy pastor on so many levels. I decided to attend a cancer support group for couples at Sparrow Hospital, except that I was by myself because I'm that kind of guy, and my wife didn't come because, well, she's that kind of gal. And so here I am sitting with all of these couples who are like the age of my parents. And I'll tell you what, to a T, every woman went around that circle and she declared how helpful her husband was because he was like a rock. I felt nothing like a rock in that moment. All I could commit to with Sarah was, I'm a mess, and I'm in this mess with you. My guess is that those dudes didn't really feel like a rock, but because they were a little older generation than me, they had learned better than I had how to shove all their emotions down and pretend that they weren't also a mess. I wanted to be supportive of my wife, but I was struggling in my own selfish mess. We've been taught in our culture, especially men, that strength is like gritting through it, never letting them see you sweat, never breaking out of like this strength that's going to see us and those around us through it, like carrying the weight of the people around us on our shoulders. But what if strength is something different? What if strength is more like, well, strong like water? You see, water is strong, but it's also flexible. Today, we're going to explore this surprising truth. The strongest thing you'll do is stop pretending that you're fine. Let me say that again. The strongest thing that you will do is to stop pretending that you are fine. Now, our culture idolizes the strong, the stoic, the self-reliant. We celebrate those who push through, suck it up, hustle harder, never failing. And we carry that same idea of strength into our spiritual lives, into our relationship with God. We read verses like this: I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And we think that means powering through the pain, never letting people see us fail, because Christ is our strength. But here's the real problem. We think we're strong. We think we're not falling apart. But underneath it, we are just surviving. We're not thriving. Maybe you're saying to yourself, people have always told me I'm so strong, but I'm tired of having to look like I have it all together. Today, we're continuing in a series based on a book by Andy Kolber called Strong Like Water. Pastor Mikkel is going to be doing a live Q&A on all of our various channels online, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, our website. She's also leading a small group at Frandor, Barnes & Noble. And these are some great resources for taking this idea of what it means to be strong like water and going deeper with it. Remember, water is strong, but it's also flexible. It can cut through a mountain, like deep gorges into a mountain, but it also is flexible. It can fill any container that you put it in. Underneath the mask of strength, we're exhausted. We're hurting. We are hyper vigilant. Last summer, I decided it was time to introduce my boys to the great series of movies, The Hunger Games. I mean, it's a great series of books if you haven't read it, if you haven't watched the movies. I mean, it's about this dystopian future. Although I got to admit, every time I open the newspaper these days, I feel like maybe we're actually living in the Hunger Games. 16-year-old Katniss Everdeen volunteers to take her sister's place in the Hunger Games, a televised fight to the death among youth from the 12 districts of Panem. As she battles for survival, Katniss navigates violence, political manipulation, and her own moral compass, all while becoming an unexpected symbol of rebellion. On the outside, she's the girl on fire, the picture of resilience. But inside, especially as the series goes on, she's haunted by trauma. She can barely sleep. She pushes people away. She hides her grief. Her strength masks the wounds that never got the space to breathe. Speaking of breathing, let's stop and catch our breath. Take a deep breath. And let's turn to our neighbor, or let's reflect in the comments your answer to this question. What's a story? That could be a book, a movie, a TV show, or whatever. What's a story of someone who had to appear strong in order to survive? Let's talk about it. Andy Kolber, in her book Strong Like Water, she introduced us to these different ideas of strength. And she talks about the first sort of strength as situational strength. It's the strength that our body kicks in to survive. Like you know this, it's like the strength to fight, the strength to flee, the strength to freeze or to fawn. Like all of those are real strengths. In each one of these things though, we're not thriving, we're reacting. Andy Kolber says this: living with this constant sense of threat causes you to bypass or unconsciously ignore good things because diverting attention from the bad could endanger your survival. In a very real sense, situational strength is real strength. But if we don't have the space to breathe, we can get stuck there. If we live out of situational strength for too long, whether because the danger is still present or the trauma is so deep, our experiences will remain fragmented in our bodies and our psyches. That fragmentation into our sense of self, it affects everything. It affects our relationships, our marriage, our family, our kids, our work, even our very sense of self and our faith. We show up to church and we smile. We greet people at the door. We volunteer on the stage or opening the door for people or in Kids Creek, and we put a smile on. But underneath, we're hurting, we're wounded, we feel alone, we feel isolated. Consider the story of Maya Angelou. She's a poet, a writer. I mean, she's known for her strength and eloquence. But what you may not know is her backstory. When she was a young child, she was raped by her mother's boyfriend. And after that, she opened up to her brother about what her mom's boyfriend did. Her brother told her family her mom's boyfriend was murdered a couple of days later, probably by Maya Angelou's uncles. Maya Angelou stopped speaking. She stopped speaking for 5 years, 5 whole years. And it would be tempting to see this mutism as a kind of like weakness. But Kolber would consider it situational strength. It helped her survive. In fact, she thought that her voice was dangerous. She felt like her voice was dangerous. Like if she spoke, people would die. Later on, she reflected on this situation saying this: you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Angelou's family never talked about this situation, but it was through the patience and slow perseverance of a teacher that Maya Angelou eventually found her voice again. She spent all kinds of time in the library. She read every single book she could get her hands on. And later, when she refound her voice, she said that she had lots of things to say about all kinds of things, which led to her amazing poetry. Listen to the autobiographical nuances of this famous line from one of her most famous poems. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Maya Angelou's story reminds us that healing doesn't always start out with noise and with action. Sometimes it starts with silence and healing over long periods of time, where our sense of self begins to become reintegrated, where new things become apparent to us. And when we do speak, we speak with a sort of depth of wisdom that we didn't have before this moment of situational strength, with the strength to survive. This is the turning point. What if we've misunderstood what strength really is? Again, what if we have misunderstood what strength really is? What if strength is about not pretending? What if strength is about letting yourself feel? The strongest thing you'll do is stop pretending you're fine. Kolber says, what if our innate ability to survive distressing, overwhelming, or traumatic experiences is strength, but so our tenderness, compassion, feeling our feelings, and learning to rest? This is what Kolber calls the flow of strength. It starts with situational strength. That's the strength to survive. It moves on to transitional strength, which is when you're not just surviving, but you're beginning to heal. And it ends with a kind of integrated strength, where the things that you have learned in order to survive are integrated, the healthy things, into who you are and how you behave and move through the world. Now, it's tempting to see it as a sort of river. I don't know if you've ever heard the proverb that you never step in the same river twice. It's not like it's linear. It's not like water that's flowing from one place to the next and you never see it again. It's more like, well, the recycled water in all of these tanks. Sometimes what you end up back at situational strength. Something triggers back into you and you are back into that moment of just surviving. But maybe you come out of it quicker. Or there's areas where you're surviving in some areas of life, but you're thriving in other areas. That's the flow of strength. Jesus models this kind of strength. He doesn't pretend to be strong when the people around him are grieving. He shows up after Lazarus' death, and we read that Jesus wept. His strength was presence. His strength was feeling all the feelings, letting the grief well up inside of him and come out. Jesus is the embodiment of God's strength. And he doesn't say to Martha, listen, Martha, buck it up, be strong, don't worry, like this is going to all turn out well. No, he is present with her in her grieving, and he grieves as well. That's regulated strength. That's compassionate strength. The strongest thing you'll do is stop pretending that you're fine. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. This idea of a yoke is really interesting, and it's not one that, like, in our culture we sort of naturally understand. But there's two sorts of yoke. There's like an animal yoke where you put two animals together and they're able to do more together than they would by themselves. There's also just an individual yoke where you can put something over your shoulders and you can carry more with that yoke than you would otherwise. It makes those things feel light. Jesus is saying, listen, I'm going to help you. Like, I'm going to be there with you. I'm going to take some of the weight with you. It's going to be like a sort of gentleness, a humbleness, a presence, a strength with Jesus. Now, I always imagine myself like in this moment, like it's like Jesus and I are two like serious Clydesdales pulling away like this. But in all likelihood, it's probably a little more like this. I'm just not a very good horse. That's what I'm trying to say. And you probably aren't either, but that's okay. Jesus is the one with the strength. And Jesus' strength is not always the way that we think of strong. It's flexible, it's soft, it's gentle. Kolber says this, now I know what it's like to feel a solid sense of myself rather than constantly react to fear or trauma. And this doesn't happen by pushing through it, by bucking it up, by being self-reliant. It happens by stop pretending that you're fine, by reaching out to others for help, by sharing the burden that you have with Jesus and letting Jesus be weak with you and in the weakness being strong. Kolber adds, love changes us in ways that fear and danger cannot. It both softens and strengthens us. Love isn't weak. It's durable. It endures. It is presence with. Love is strength. Let's stop for a moment and contemplate this. Turn to a neighbor or put your answer in the comments. What would it look like if being strong started with being soft and flexible? We've looked at what works when it comes to situational strength, but I want to explore the cost of situational strength. I want to do that by looking at like a modern musical. It's a fabulous musical about mental health and suicide. Maybe you already know which one I'm talking about. It's Dear Evan Hansen. Dear Evan Hansen is the Broadway musical about a high school senior with severe social anxiety. His therapist suggests he writes letters to himself as a motivational exercise. These letters usually start with, Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a good day, and here's why. Evan writes one of these letters at school, and Connor Murphy, a troubled classmate, finds the letter and takes it. Later that day, Connor dies by suicide. Connor's parents find Evan's letter in Connor's pocket and assume it was Connor's suicide note addressed to Evan. They believe Evan and Connor were secret best friends. It would make sense at this point for Evan to just make a simple correction. Hey, listen, I am sorry to tell you, but that's not what that letter is. But instead, Evan begins in that moment to weave a sort of web of lies and deceptions for the sake of surviving his own sense of lack of belonging. And so he goes with the story that the parents have sort of made up in their mind about who Evan and Connor were. He adds to it by creating whole stories, whole memories, whole emails and letters that they exchanged back and forth. And in the process of this, Evan is adopted into Connor's family, finding the family that he always wanted, finding a place where he belongs. But it's a belonging built on lies and falsehoods. The lie even brings Evan closer to Connor's sister Zoe, whom Evan has a crush on. Evan finally gets the belonging and attention he's always craved, and he even becomes a spokesperson for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. Oh, the irony. A social media campaign called The Connor Project goes viral. The lie grows bigger and bigger. The deception digs deeper and deeper. Evan is surviving, but he's surviving by pretending. Eventually, the weight of all of these lies and deception creates this existential angst for Evan. He can't bear it anymore, and he confesses to the family. There's a classic song in that moment that was eventually made into a movie called Words Fail. Watch and listen.
Words fail. Words fail. There's nothing I can say.
But you said that you guys would talk about me. You would... How could you do this?
I guess I thought I could be part of this. I never had this kind of thing before. I never had that perfect girl who somehow could see the good part of me. I never had the dad who stuck it out. No corny jokes or baseball gloves. No mom who just was there 'cause mom was all that she had to be. That's not a worthy explanation. I know there is none. Nothing can make sense of all these things I've done. Words fail, words fail. There's nothing I can say, except sometimes you see everything you wanted, and sometimes you see everything you wish you had, and it's right there, right there, right there in front of you. And you want to believe it's true. So you make it true. And you think maybe everybody wants it, needs it a little bit too.
I think it's time for you to go.
He's finally honest. He's finally not surviving. But the cost to this, the cost to being honest, to moving towards more of an integrated strength, is a deep wound to Connor's family. Your situational strength may keep you surviving, but if you stay there, it will come at great cost to you, and in all likelihood, great cost to those around you. This play, this musical is fabulous because it doesn't put on like an inspirational bow at the end and tie it all together. In a lot of ways, it leaves us hanging with the wounds that are still there, still unresolved, still yet to be worked through. In a lot of ways, that's what life is like. And yet, the strongest thing you'll do is stop pretending you're fine. We were meant for more than survival. We were meant for thriving. Jesus said it this way, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Surviving kept you here, but thriving makes here worth it. Remember the flow of strength? Situational strength, the transitional strength to integrated strength. Kolber says the strength of resilience doesn't happen because of wounding, but because of what happens afterward. The full life isn't white knuckle surviving. It's a flow of strength. It's surviving that flows into a transitional phase, into a integrated phase. And all of these are strengths. Surviving is a strength, but don't get stuck there. The strongest thing you'll do is stop pretending you're fine. Kolber gives us a whole series of compassionate resources, which helps us kind of ground and flow through the different kinds of strength. And one of them is just 3 sets of questions. I'm going to put these questions on the screen and let you just meditate silently on the answers to these questions. What situational strength am I still carrying? Where am I still pretending? What masks feel stuck to my face? What story am I performing that isn't fully true? Take a moment and meditate on that. What did this strength protect me from? Don't shame it. Honor it. It kept you alive. It got you here. Name what it protected. What would it cost me to take it off? What would it give me? Be honest about both. There's always a cost to being real, and there's always a gift. God, we give you the strength that kept us alive, but was never meant to be our home. The pretending, the performing, the hiding. We place it in your hands. Teach us to be real. Teach us that being loved as we are is better than being admired for who we're not. And all who agreed said, Amen.